Today we're going to be talking about one of the most famous judgments that you ever see in the Bible. So when you think judgment, you think end of the world, you might think the flood, but probably a close third, maybe second, is the destruction of Sodom, where God rains down fire and brimstone. If you've ever heard that expression, fire and brimstone, this is where it comes from.
Okay, so another fun one.
Yeah, another fun one, that's right. With it, it shows God's character, that he is a God of justice, but woven through every single one of these stories, you find the mercy of God that he extends to people. And so you see the totality of God, and it's good for us to recognize that he is holy and just. And we find in this story as well a God of mercy who's looking to redeem people.
And the crazy part about this is really the recent archaeological evidence that comes from the ancient city of Sodom.
That's right. If you look around on the news, when these discoveries were being made and they were being published by the scientists and archaeologists who found them, many news outlets began posting news that Sodom had potentially been discovered. And so the guy who discovered this, his name is Stephen Collins, he's an archaeologist, and he got permission from the Jordanian government to start searching for Sodom. And there was one particular place that he wanted to search, because when the Bible talks about Sodom, it says that it's visible from the Jordan, from where Abraham was standing at Bethel and Ai, and you look over straight across the Jordan, and there was a mound that was called Tel El Hammam. And he was like, that fits all the criteria of ancient Sodom, the size of it, because Sodom was a massive city in the ancient world. And so he got permission to start doing an archaeological dig there. And when he began to dig there, he was blown away by what he found.
So the evidence really shows us it's going back thousands of years, that now in our modern day, that this is not just some made up story, but we have real things being brought up from the ground that actually back what this story, and it's crazy, and we're going to talk about the crazy parts, but back what actually the biblical narrative states.
That's right. And so as he's digging it up, it comes from the right time, the Middle Bronze Age period. It's got all the right fortifications, the size, the region, even down to what you would expect to find in an ancient palace of this type. They're digging all of this up, and everything matches to where other people, even skeptics, are saying, maybe this inspired the story of Sodom, because everything links up. Now, we know, with the Bible being inspired, this is Sodom. And so as he's digging around, he finds tons of evidence. And one of the things is, this city is massive, which sets us apart from all the other archaeological digs. Like ancient Jericho was a massive city. This city is 5 times the size of Jericho.
So we should expect to find something in the ground.
Correct, yeah. So 62 acres inside the walls. If you look at what's there today before they started digging, it just looks like a big mound. Well, they built the cities on top of these mounds for defense. And so he's going around, and you find walls over here, and one of the first places that he digs is at the top of this thing, which is where you should expect to find the royal palace. And that's what he finds.
Okay, so he discovers this palace. So what's the deal with the palace?
Well, as he's excavating the palace, one of the things, and it's called the Red Palace, and one of the reasons why it's called the Red Palace is it was destroyed with fire that left red coloration all over the rocks from the damage of the fire. And as they're excavating, they're having to remove several feet of ash, because this city had been burned, and the roof and timbers and everything else had fallen in and been buried under there. So we find a city with all the dimensions, location, fortifications of Sodom, and we know that it was burned and destroyed by fire. But then as he keeps going, he's finding that there was a blast that shoved everything over, like everything is kind of bent a little bit from some blast that kind of shoved it. And when he starts looking around in the city, he comes up with a theory that's been validated by other scientists and astrophysicists from the region, where he's finding this explosion that happened overhead, so fire and brimstone from above.
Okay.
He's theorizing that this was a meteor, that the explosion, when it came into our atmosphere over the Dead Sea, was so absolutely intense that it turned sand into diamondoids. It shocked quartz. It left glass layers over pottery where it had come in with such force and heat that it transformed the landscape and so many things in the city instantaneously.
So this wasn't just a casual palace fire.
No. Like an ordinary house fire today burns at around 1100 to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay.
When they were finding things in the ruins, the damage that was caused that turned things to glass and whatnot, it had to have been at a heat that is around the neighborhood of 3,600 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, in the ancient world, they had no technology that could replicate this. The only explanation, that's hotter than magma, that's hotter than lava, and anything like that. So the only explanation that we could find is that this came from a meteoric blast that just shocked the ground and melted things. And one of the other cool things is when they looked around at the landscape, you could see that the landscape was actually peppered with like charcoal looking things,
Oh, wow.
where it had literally been raining down these burning rocks on this city. One of the really interesting things that they found was a whole bunch of what's called trinitite rocks.
Mm.
And it's called trinitite rocks. If you went back to the 40s when they were testing the atomic bomb, and they used what was called the Trinity bomb, Trinity explosion. It came down and it actually transformed rocks into trinitite rocks because it blistered them. And they started calling it trinitite rocks because the force of the explosion and the heat of the explosion instantly blistered these rocks. And so when you go into Sodom and you're looking around at different pottery shards that were left behind, you can see that they're glazed because of the degrees of the heat, but they're also blistered. So the same kind of force that you found in the atomic explosion, the test explosion, you find in Sodom. So this was no small thing. This was cataclysmic.
So it makes sense that a whole city would be destroyed if something like this happened.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So you mentioned already a modern atomic bomb,
Mhm.
because we're talking about thousands and thousands of years before this. So in our modern vocabulary and our modern mindset, what would this explosion have been like?
We don't have a lot to compare it to, but probably the closest where some of the scientists have compared it to this was in 1908. There was a meteoric explosion over Tunguska, Russia. And you can see pictures if you Google it, you'll see this all the trees and forests are just laid over because of the force of this blast. And they theorized that this was more than 1,000 times more powerful than the Hiroshima atomic bomb. And they're saying that this blast over Tel El Hammam or Sodom was more powerful than that. So imagine 1,000 Hiroshimas and up the volume. That's what we're talking about.
Wow, so it makes sense that an ancient city would have easily been destroyed by this.
Yeah, would have been decimated, and everything in its path would have been decimated for miles. Obviously, with a blast like this, you would expect many, many cities to be destroyed. And so they started looking at the surrounding landscape that's around Tel El Hammam, and they found evidence that this explosion decimated the whole region. In fact, when they started doing the dig, they found that from this moment, Sodom goes from being a city 5 times larger than Jericho, and after this moment, for 700 years, the city's entirely uninhabited. It's made a wasteland.
And Sodom was known as this like beautiful, lush, even garden-like city. So the
Mhm.
fact that it was decimated and left uninhabitable for 700 years is crazy.
Yeah. So even if today, like if you jump to Genesis 13, it talks about it, like you said, being well watered, like the garden of the Lord. It's comparing it to Eden. You get in, you get in a plane, you go over there today. It's like desert. It's totally desolate. It's rocks and sand, and you wonder, like, if it's well watered like the garden of the Lord, what led people to run away from this city for 700 years? And this is where the story gets really, really fascinating to me.